Hello, dear foodie friends, and welcome to Kitchen Chat. I'm your host, Margaret McSweeney. I'm so glad you're joining us today for this very, very special interview. I can't wait for you to meet Chef Florian Hugo. If the last name sounds familiar, he is the fifth generation grandson of Victor Hugo. Of course, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Les Miserables, and many other great works. Why this is so special, as many of you know, I began this journey of Kitchen Chat after my father passed away. It was 33 years ago. And my big regret was not going into the kitchen to be able to cook with him. The last thing that happened, he passed away in Paris. He and a colleague went to Notre Dame, and my dad and this colleague spent an hour at Notre Dame where he lit a candle as an act of forgiveness for someone who had wronged him in a business deal, prayed blessing upon him, and then just an hour later passed away at Charles de Gaulle Airport. So Notre Dame has always and will forever be very, very dear to me in my heart. So I just feel like this is a hug from heaven, connecting with the great-great-great-great-grandson of Victor Hugo with Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm sure you all have that. But we're going to talk with Chef Florian Hugo about his culinary journey, how, like Notre Dame, there has been a history, but also chapters of new beginning. And we're going to see how food has made the world smaller and more delicious and all of the great things. So Chef Florian,
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
This is so special to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, and a special thank you to Latham Watkins, where we're filming, a lovely space. Let's start with the history. Okay, let's start with the history of Notre Dame. I'm sure you heard lots of stories growing up. Tell us about that.
It's been, it's basically, for me, is the heart of Paris. It was basically the beginning of the city, right? As a very major building, and it has burned many times, been rebuilt many times, and I'm very happy to see that despite what happened in 2019, it's about to be even more beautiful than it was before. I've seen the progress of renovation. I just saw a documentary a month ago, and how much dedication from all corners of the industry, rebuilding industry, how passionate people are, working on this renovation, and from the material to respecting the original drawings and architectural, features. I can't wait to be back in the space. This is, I have a pilgrimage, as you probably do have every time I go to Paris. And it's not only beautiful, it's meaningful to a lot of French people, a lot of visitors in Paris, but it's just such a beautiful, and there's something special about it. There's something very emotional about it. And of course, on my part, there's somehow an additional connotation with my ancestor, Victor Hugo.
Yes.
And so it's a way to say, hello. I'm here, paying respect. Yeah, amazing building, really, and so happy that people move very fast to rebuild this iconic.
Yes.
There was a lot of debate at the time why pouring so many billions into one building when the rest of the world. And it's true, but no matter what, there's city money being spent everywhere, and this is really something that's so iconic and symbolically important for Paris, but for France also.
Yes,
and so
and for the
when
world.
when the needle fell, you could feel everybody gasping. Oh my God, that's it. Symbolically, that's it. But I think at that time, as you were building a parallel between what may happen in our lives, we all fall and we all think this is the end, we're going to crash and never get back up. I think the next few weeks, when we saw the outpouring of love, financial love, and really will to rebuild, this is the same attitude we should all have, because this is never the end until Until we go on the ground, we need to keep getting back up. That's how it is. Huh?
That is so true. And I just want to say a special thank you to Michel Picot, our mutual friend. He is the president of Friends of Notre Dame de Paris, and he is spearheading the effort, the fundraising effort. So I'll make sure I have a link, and you can be part of the history making of donating to rebuild as it reopens Notre Dame. So, within your family, are there any tales of Notre Dame that have been passed through the generations from Victor Hugo?
Well, I couldn't recall, besides, of course, some maybe famous novel that my sister wrote. I think we all have a very specific appreciation for the building, and it helps, of course, maybe selfishly, it helps to remind everyone of what my ancestor wrote about. Yes. It's like a permanent promotion of his work, and he's already so present in the city and in France. His name is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Good for him. I mean, it's the way he was really honored that way. But I couldn't recall artistically or family stories. Nothing was passed down on me in that regard. Sorry, but I have, as I said, I pay respect. I have my own pilgrimage every time I go there.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. And you are continuing the tradition of your family in terms of their artist, and you're a culinary artist. How did you begin your journey within the culinary industry?
I don't want to say by accident. Both my parents were very different. My mom more on the intellectual side, educational side, which I was very attracted to. My father was a goldsmith, so more of a handy job, the same as my grandfather. So when I was 10, I was like, I'm gonna take over what my father is doing, and then it started changing, and then you go back and forth, and I ended up wanting to become a diplomat because I wanted to travel. I wanted to meet people on a different angle. I wanted to, I like the idea of being a diplomat, but at the same time, I had been exposed to cooking through my parents and through dinners they had hosted. Both my mom cooking and my parents were divorced for a long time, so they had very different way to live and different way to operate and different way of cooking. Mm-hmm. My mom was more about, let's make do with what we have, which is a great tool when you're a chef. It's called fridge cooking. So sometimes we buy, sometimes like, okay, let's cook. What matters is that we cook.
Yes.
My father was more about collecting books from the great chefs such as, of course, Paul Bocuse, Alain Chapelle, Frère Trois Gros, and all that. And so I had opulent side of dining, and I had, let's make happen kind of dining. And both of them are really imprint in my, I would say, skills right now, because from that exposure, I really obtained a certain appreciation, if not love, for creating the dining experience, not only as a chef and as a cook, but really be able to create for a moment, a very special experience. Mm-hmm. You choose your friend. If you know them well, you design the menu accordingly. You choose the wine according to the menu. You set the table. You're really able to change and to customize every experience according to that. And so you're creative for 2-3 hours. You're a creator of things, and there's always, you never go how the dinner is going to go. Mm-hmm. If people are going to argue, if people are going to love the food, if people are going to, laugh, whatever, and that's the question mark. But yes. There is, it's really, really attractive for me. And to this day, whether I cook for 300 people, which I do not like, never liked it, I love being able to communicate with my guests. I remember one day, so how did I maybe got the idea, yes. What's the genesis of me becoming a chef? I think several factors, but I remember having a small epiphany when my father at the time, I think I was 12, took me to the Frère Trois Gros in Rouen, and I had the most magical and alien-like experience about food. We had a tasting menu, of course, as it was tradition at the time, and this is when I realized there was cooking, there's feeding people, there is cooking with love, and then there's pure creativity, like genius creativity, where you really can create unexpected things. And I remember, of course, the saumon à l'oseille, which was delicious, but something that really triggered an interest and the question mark was the dessert. I think it was a black cherry soup with Sichuan pepper, and it was like, why would you put pepper in the soup and cherries? And I tried it and was like, oh my God, this is amazing, this is delicious. And from that day, it was like, okay, so there are many doors into this field, into this world of cooking, and it's up to us to open the one we want and discover and explore. And even though it took me, up until I was 18, I went into law, I tried to get into Sciences Po, I really wanted to become a diplomat, and then I realized I didn't like that world. So I quit. I went for 6 months after I quit law, I went to clean gardens of my friends, I went to empty my mind and say, what the hell am I gonna do with my life?
That's okay.
And then I had a discussion one day with my cousin, and he said, I know you like cooking. I said, yes, I like cooking. He said, cooking professionally is very different than cooking in a home. I say, I know, but I think I'd like to try, because you can travel, as I wanted to do. You can meet people on a different angle. You can create special moments. And I got into, I went first to Vancouver to continue that mental break. And I met so many different people who were doing different things in their life, complete different things, and yet we're able to combine them in one life, and which makes it even richer. And so when I came back, for some reason, I heard about the Institut of Écully who was opening, which was presided by Paul Bocuse, and I was like, I want to try. So I postulated, I applied, I got accepted, and it started from there,
So, Paul Bocuse.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to know him? Can you share with us? Because such a
real
icon.
character, he opens so many doors, of course, as most of your spectators might know. But at the time, back in the 70s, chefs were still, stuck in the kitchen, not superstars. And then it's not about being a superstar, but they were not mobile. They were not able to expand, to travel, to take their skills or kitchen in a way, even for pop-ups as we do now so many times. And he opened so many doors in starting to travel and to say, hey, he was the first ambassador of French cooking, basically, international ambassador. Right. And I think from his tenure, if we can say as ambassador, this is what that movement was created to allow other chefs to open a second restaurant and not be in the kitchen all the time, but say it's still my restaurant, it's still my recipes, it's still my structure, and I'm still commanding everything, but I'm able to duplicate this into restaurant. And then chef otherwise would have taken maybe more time for chef to become entrepreneur, like Alain Ducasse, who I work for, or Joël Robuchon, or so many others in the city who, most of them have several restaurants.
You've worked with Paul Bocuse, with Alain Ducasse. You have worked with the giants. What lessons did they instill in you as a chef and life?
With Paul Bocuse, so I didn't work with him, but he came many times, of course, at the school. He was doing classes, but more. It was not about doing cooking classes. It's really about when you work for such chef. You don't get a one-on-one cooking lesson with them. It's always through someone else. So what you really get from these characters is how do they manage to do all this, and you start analyzing. Okay, of course they're very talented chefs, cooks. I would say cook just for the act of cooking, but how do they manage to transmit that to their chef de cuisine? How do they manage to operate remotely a restaurant while working on different projects? And this is something that, so I worked a lot more, of course, with Alain Ducasse and Chef Alain Ducasse, and it was always my reflection when I would see him, because recipes you can like or not like, there's, you learn the techniques, you learn with Paul Bocuse, it was about respecting traditions, and respect in a way that you want them to perdure. So even if you always add some modern aspect to it, because people evolved, our clientele evolved, Blanquette de Veau is still Blanquette de Veau, whether you deconstruct it, or whether you have different ways to plate it, the essence of the plate, the flavor, and the spirit should always be there. And I think with Bocuse, it was really about, because it was such a person who carried out that French culinary flag everywhere. It was like being able to meet with him several times and hearing talk to us and about his passion for preserving that culture really stays here as a Frenchman that I am.
Yes.
But with Chef Ducasse, it was really about how do you manage all this? And a lot of that is about respecting who you are, respecting your craft, and respecting in a way that you have to defend it every day, that you have to, we're working so hard.
Yes.
Whether you're in any position in the kitchen, we're working so hard to create a 2-hour meal, and the next day is the same thing. But the amount of work, specifically in 3-star Michelin and even in the bistro, the amount of work provided necessary to create that meal is huge. It's a huge mental, physical effort. And so when you have someone who comes along, whether it's a cook or anything that's somehow interfering with the operation and that's compromising it, it ruins the entire effort. And I've learned I've never been a dictator type of chef or screaming but when I get really upset is when I see someone who's sabotaging his own work because he didn't pay attention for 3 minutes. And I remember one day, one of my cook, tomato confit. It takes 3 hours to make. It's such a labor of love and hard work, and you can burn them in literally 2 minutes.
Wow.
And one day that happened. I was like, look, he had like 5 trays representing 4 hours of work. Of course, the cost and all that. And then I hear him talking about, I don't know, it was football game the day before, and then the smoke comes out, and I'm like,
oh no,
this is not okay. Of course, I'm upset because you're ruining my food, my cost, and all that, but you just ruined 4 hours of work. And this is where I try to instill in the people who work with me is respect what you do.
Yes.
It's not, don't do this because I'm here. Don't give me the perfect plate because I'm in front of you. I want to do that. I want you to do that when I'm not here also.
Right.
Because you're doing this for yourself. Of course, we're doing this for the customer who's paying, who comes for that. This is our job. We're not at home. I'm not your guest at home. Somebody coming to pay, just like they go to Broadway show, they pay for the tickets, they expect the best.
Right.
If someone is not performing, you're like, oh my God, please stop, and you want a refund. It's the same in the restaurant, so we fail. So, and it's a very hard task, because especially now more and more, a lot of people do not care for what they do. They just want a paycheck. Very few are doing this by profession, as the true meaning of profession. We profess in front of our craft, and we give it all and our passion to it. And
your joy, your joie de vivre.
And it should be, it's a happy job.
Yes.
Very hard, but the silver lining is if you come out as a customer smiling and say, thank you, I had the best meal, we succeeded. All our efforts, that 5%, return on investment, yes, and let's do it the same tomorrow. Of course, there are days where we don't, and we try to fix it.
Right.
I remember working at the Four Seasons Hotel for a while, and the golden rule was, help. What was it? When we made a mistake, we would always tell, maybe not the cooks, we were not supposed to get, but the response would be, "Thank you for giving me the opportunity of doing a better job."
Yes.
And a lot of things should really be taken like this. Okay, we made a mistake. But we're gonna show you, because everybody make mistakes, but not everybody fix them or fix them graciously. And it's like, okay, we made a mistake. Whoever cook your meal or your plate, let us show you how we can turn things back, and actually, from a customer who might not have had an interaction with the chef or with the general manager or whatever, you actually had an extra. We failed here, but we give you so much more than you forgot about everything. And so that's very important. But it's a very hard task to accomplish with the staff.
Those teachable moments and beginning again and rebuilding. I'd love to talk about the landscape, both the history, the present, and the future of French cuisine here in New York City. It was so special. I guess one of the genesis of that was with Auguste Escoffier. I recently found out he was the one who was the opening chef at the Pierre New York Etage Hotel, and recently had a kitchen chat over there and the history of that. So he set the table of French cuisine officially here. How have you seen it through the lens of history, present, and what's next?
That is a big question.
I'm sorry.
Let me take a second. I will share from what I've experienced. So I've been in New York almost 24 years this year. And I think I arrived right at the cusp of what at the time they call the old French dinosaurs from, these old classic French restaurants that had been open for 30, 40, 50, some of them 50 years. Have been holding that bastion, that flag of classic, very classic French cuisine. But I think it was at the time where the audience, the public, start having not a negative perception of French cuisine, but a need for change. A need for, we've seen the same thing for too long, and we don't mind eating the same thing, but you guys need to refresh it. This is how I personally took it as a chef and as a customer as well. And I remember Rita Jammet, who's our very dear common friend, still had La Caravelle at the time, which was one of the last. La Grenouille was still open, Les Spinaches, but then all of these great restaurants closed in the first 5 years of 2000s. But this is where I think it started sort of a renouveau, where French chefs had to start thinking, okay, we have to stop copy and paste. Nothing wrong with using these recipes, and we should still use that because this is our DNA. I'm not so much for doing so much fusion and fusion is not always Japanese with French cuisine or Latino cuisine with French. It's about sometimes getting lost in, we cannot do like the past, so we have to do something completely different. And then you get lost because it just becomes a cooked fish with cooked vegetable and some kind of sauce. And this is not essentially just French cuisine. So I think the exercise, the years that followed the closure of these restaurants, you start seeing more modern looking restaurant, but also in the thinking, in the concept, start implementing, specifically in the New York, in this city, chefs such as Alain Ducasse made sure that they were using, for instance, they were sourcing the best American ingredients. He wrote a book about this, how he was sourcing, left, right, from Ohio to the East Coast for where is the best ingredients that we cannot find, that we would find otherwise in France. Because, of course, you can operate restaurants shipping everything from France. And so there was already thought of, okay, how blending American culture, agriculture, and all that with the French cuisine. So it's not fusion, but it's like sort of start paying respect and implementing that, because you're not in France, you don't have, the majority of your customers are not French. So somehow our job is really we have several jobs in the restaurant experience, right? We need to, from honoring where we come from, the tradition, to really being hospitable and making you happy. So you can, some customers will come and say, show me what you have. Whatever you serve me, I will love it. But that's 5% of the clientele. The rest of the clientele will be like, give me what I want. And we're going more and more towards that now, which is not always a benefit, because people now I think a lot of chefs or restaurants are afraid to endeavor in new things, unless you are at the very top. And 3-star plus, and you're like, I do what I want, and the rest will follow, just like haute couture. But the majority of restaurants tend to just look left and right. Okay, that's working, so we're going to do the same. This restaurant is looking like that, so that's a new trend. We're going to do the same, and that, I think there's a lot of delusion of maybe creativity in that. But at the same time, you have over 15,000 restaurants in the city. So the hardest part is to find those who really work hard to be themselves, to be original, and you have really true diamonds. But to go back to the subject and the big question in hand, I think New York pushed let's say, the French cuisine and everybody who is involved in that to evolve to being a bit more modernized. And I actually think that somehow some of my French colleagues maybe won't like that, but I remember at the same time that these dinosaurs were dying here, I remember going to Paris and realizing that a lot of the skilled chefs were not that skilled anymore.
Wow.
It's true, and definitely I'm not far from being the best chef in the world. But as a customer in France, what really stands out is that you can go to a bistro, to a cafe, to a 3-star, wherever you go, to a village there is a certain quality bar that's higher than many other countries. The basic French person already has higher standard than a lot of other citizens in the world. And so from caring from where their food comes from, we can track still right now where the beef you're buying come from. There's a huge difference in that. There's a lot of things we say no to, the chemicals and all this. And so in terms of cuisine, that's always been there. And I remember at the time, I don't know if it was around 2005 or 2010, going to places I used to go before, I was like, wow, the level is down. Really, the level is down.
Wow.
And I don't want to say that if, this is a question mark, if what happened here, like in New York and many other places, what happened to French cuisine here somehow forced French chef and French customer to be more demanding, to question themselves and say, okay, maybe we've been doing too much of the same and it's time for us to adapt, preserve tradition, but just to adapt it to the new audience. You know, there's a similarity, I don't know if it's with religion and how religion is going down because they've been doing the same thing and not listening to the demand of new disciples. I wouldn't say disciple, but so how to attract, this might be the same issue, how to we keep that attractivity and stay up to date, right?
Yes, creative relevance.
Because if you don't adapt, if you don't evolve, you die. This is evolution, and it's the same for cuisine.
Yeah.
So I think, but to go back to my Paris experience, in the last few years, I've seen a lot of great chefs who work for a very great chef and who decides to not open 3-star restaurant, but to open these jewel box, like really 50-seat restaurant, and they serve a 3-course meal for 35 euros, and you can taste that the person has worked and has acquired the best skills, but decides to, and I think this is what France should be about, is wherever you go, you will eat well. You don't have to spend 500 euros. You can spend 25 euros on a 3-course, and you were like, wow, this is the best soupe à l'oignon, this is the best simple trout, best profiterole or what, because every step of the recipe is respected, and the person who's behind say, no, we should not serve the profiterole from yesterday. It should be from today, it should be crispy and soft at the same time, and that sauce should be, tasting like fresh chocolate and not something that you pour out of a bottle that's made 5,000 miles away by someone who has no idea about how it should be tasting. So we have, I think chefs we are true ambassadors of our craft, and we have the responsibility to make that perdure, to make that last. And the only way to do that is to observe, listen, observe the world, our world in culinary, and see what's needed to evolve.
Yes.
Do we need to change? Do we need to stay where we are? Do we need to reinforce rules and make sure that people don't go sideways? And it's okay, they won't mind. No. And that's one thing that I've learned with the Chef de Casse is that there's no compromise.
Love that.
No compromise. So it's not because many other chef or many other customer, the level go down, that yours should. And so whether I cook at home or whether I cook, I do a lot of private dinners with a friend of mine now and all that, and I do sauces and I cook the same way as I would when I was working with him or in my restaurant, all that. There's no they don't care, they won't know. Because you can tell sometimes when people don't have the same knowledge, culinary knowledge. It's just like when you serve a $5,000 bottle of wine, it's not because they don't know that they should not be exposed and they should not be educated to it, because this is how it starts. The next time they drink it, they'll be like, I know and I appreciate it. Yeah?
Exactly.
So,
it's about teaching.
It's about teaching, transmitting, and transferring that passion and respect. Respect, I think, is number one. Respect for your craft. Respect for the customer, respect from the customer to the craft that we serve, and respect for tradition. It's really if you have respect and humility, you're on the good path. But it's not always it's not always easy for people to know or to acquire.
Exactly. And don't compromise. Great word.
No compromise.
Well, I want us to talk about this. And foodie friends, I'll send you a link. This is Chef Florian Hugo's book.
It's an old friend now.
This
is like 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
But it's timeless. Timeless.
It is timeless. This was, so I'm no writer. I didn't get that from my ancestor. I wouldn't say I'm a avid reader also because I've never had time to read. My schedule is 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. and I don't even have time to sleep. But I've always wanted to, it's very intimidating to even think about publishing a book when you have that family name because you will always be compared no matter what, even if you're not. I remember my French teacher, my philosophy teacher said, so Hugo, huh? So yeah, I'm not Victor, so don't, okay. Right? Very intimidating. So that's why I never put forward my name for the longest time until journalists, really pushed that. And they're like, oh, so you are. And then every article that followed had to start with this, of course.
Yes.
But I know who I am. I know my limit. This book was somehow, for me, a way to find a way to transmit my passion for what I do. From the cooking part to somehow encourage people to cook. That's why the recipe that I chose I decided not to do too elaborate of recipes because I want to be for the home cook.
Yes.
I want people really to not just put this on the coffee table, to actually make it dirty maybe and put it next to the stove. Say, okay, so how do we do this? And encourage them to try again because this is how I got to cooking. This is by getting the Faire Trois Gros and Bocuse book and trying. Say, it doesn't taste good. Maybe screw it up. Let's try again. Because if we lose that, then we lose. When you have customers who come to the restaurant and really don't know anything about what we're serving, great, there's discovery part, but most of the time they will not understand, so they won't be happy, and they will actually sometimes complain and be like, this is not how it's supposed to be, and it's hard to tell them, well, this is how it's supposed to be from where it comes from, but we understand you don't like it. But this book was a way for me to transmit part of my passion and emotion for what I do. And at the same time, I felt there was somehow no escape for me but to mention that heritage. And I was like, why don't we find a way to blend these two worlds, right? Yes. These 5 generations ago world from a guy who was a gourmand, but not a fine gourmet for sure. That was actually the hardest part in the conceptual aspect of the book, both visually and intellectually, how to blend these two worlds. Old, me being more modern because now and at the time 2011, on the recipe side, on the visual side, and I remember it took with Michel Lafont, the editor, it took us 4 months to agree. Wow. We went back and forth. I said, no, I don't want it. I want this to be primarily a cookbook. This is not a Victor Hugo book. No. His face first. I didn't want his face to be there. I said, okay, I understand the why. But I said, primarily for me, I want this book to be used as a cookbook.
Yes.
And then the second layer is we pay homage, we pay respect to my ancestor. And why not expose an aspect of his life that hasn't been really told? Yes. Because we've had so many biographies in English, in French, from so many very respected authors who really dig down and who have deep passion for his work and for him. But I was like, I'm just a guy who fell from the tree, right? My last name is what it is. It's like, why don't we work on digging somehow what's related to his personal life, his taste in cooking or eating. And so we work with Marie-Laure Prévost, who's, I don't know if she still is, in charge of the National Library. And Michel Lafont asked her to dig out somehow anything that was related, even remotely to his personal life and eating and all that. So we had so many great documents, pictures, receipts of him buying chocolate in Besançon because he was living on top of a chocolaterie or a confiserie, or pictures of him in Guernsey when he's with the poor kids that he was feeding once a week and giving them wine and meat, and to to somehow menus that we got that someone kept of dinners at his place. So all of this, and then his habits and all this. So it was an interesting thing to do. It was and interestingly, because you grew up in the Hugo family, you have stories passed down. You have these books. We have like original books at home. My father passed away, so we divided these books. Our siblings now we all have a piece of edition of it. But so we have these objects, these stories, these people. We meet so many people who like, oh my God, you are the great-grandson of. I say yes, and they know so much more about him than we do. I've read most of his books before I was like 16, 17, and I regret because it's so intimidating. And I realize I'm rereading now slowly everything. It's like, who was I to understand that the level of complexity and it's so of actuality, most of them. But I got lost in my conversation. No. I speak too much.
No, so I'd love to understand the melding of his cuisine. So did you get to know him through food?
That's what I was getting to that. Somehow making this book got me closer to who he was.
Yes.
In a way that was not transmitted by my family, by my parents, by my grandparents and all that. And so, going back to Guernsey and shooting recipes over there, being in the very home, I think his home in Hauteville House in Guernsey, really, his spirit transpires because he invested in himself so much. He was a do-it-all. He was scouting the island for furnitures, undoing them, rebuilding the way he wanted, integrating different objects into it. And so the house is at the same time very obscure, freaky, genius in terms of originality and all that. And so you really feel like you get to know him a bit more because everything you look at, he made, he organized, so it was a true humble experience to be there in this house, because the first time I had been there I was too young to remember. And so I actually stayed right next to the house, but I remember drinking Calvados with the lady who handled the house, and we were like, it's funny to think he might have been in this very same position, a century ago doing the same thing. And so what we gathered is that he was not a fin gourmet. He liked to do what he called the gribouillis. So whatever he was served, he would just chop up everything, mix everything, and eat like this. He would eat lobster with the shell. He would eat oranges with the skin. He was not gargantuesque, but he was
bon vivant.
He was bon vivant, but I think his personality was so strong in originality that it transpired in everything he do, from the way he was living to the way he arranged his house to everything he wrote. He was really singular in that way, and but true respect for the person. Of course, he has downside like everybody, but I think he had a great quality, which was integrity, and this was the reason why he was in exile, because he didn't agree with the change in opinion with Napoleon, and so he's like, I stick to my beliefs. I'm leaving because I'm not going to pretend.
Back to your original tenet.
Yeah.
Don't compromise.
Don't compromise.
Yes.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because it's sometimes every day you're exposed to the easier way, and sometimes you get tired, you get depressed, you fall. When you fall, and it happened to me many times, you're tired, and it demands a lot of energy to stick to your principle and say, no, I will honor that recipe, I will order my craft, I will, and there's not only cooking, there's everything you do in your life, you have kids, you have stuff, and so to be uncompromising can cost a lot. Sure. You can lose people, you can lose sometimes faith in things, you can lose material stuff, but that's something nobody can take away from you.
Right. And like Notre Dame, it can be rebuilt.
Rebuilt?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'd love for you to share this beautiful story, because I think you get to the heart of cuisine and the strength of a meal, sharing a meal. Can you share with us what you once witnessed in Paris with the political
That was
landscape?
At that moment, I'm going to put it here. At that moment, it was a validation of my decision of becoming a chef, I think. my own validation. I was working at Restaurant Alain Ducasse, Avenue Raymond Poincaré, his first restaurant in Paris. And so I was still a stagiaire at the time. And so I had just left law school the prior year and still thinking, am I doing the right thing? This is crazy. I'm working insane hours. We were working about 20 hours a day, maybe 19, cleaning 5 times a day. It was like, this is nuts. Why am I doing this? Why? And it was an election year. I think Jacques Chirac was up for re-election. And I remember the day prior seeing him arguing with his opponent on TV, barking like dogs and, shooting at each other, and I was like, oh wow, that's really politics. And the very next day, we had a table called the aquarium, the chef's table, right next to the pass in the kitchen. It was a very it was a private, it was hôtel particulier. I forgot how you said it in English. So a very tight space, dining room, and kitchen. And so the table was like 5 feet away from us. And I see him arriving, actual president, with the same opponent that he was barking at the day before. And we're like, whoa, that's gonna be hot, right? And then I realized that they start sharing a great moment. They start laughing. They start reminiscing about their common time in ENA, in the famous administration school. They were buddies. They were joking. So it was really about, okay, that was really politics. But at that moment, I realized this is why I'm going to do what I do. It's because we're able, and I say we, it was Alain Ducasse restaurant, but I mean as chefs, restaurateurs, cooks, we're able to, for that ephemeral moment of 2-3 hours, create somehow a bubble, a magical bubble that, this experience that can be so personal and so gratifying for the person who's experiencing it, but a bubble because they can forget about the distractions and their duties and everything that's outside of it for that particular and small amount of time. And so if we succeed in preserving that bubble, and that means a lot of things, that means perfect service, perfect ambiance, serving what's expected at the level of quality that's expected, then we succeed. And then as a guest, you're able to really forget about everything and either focus, depending on the type of culinary experience you're having, focus on the culinary experience or focus on the company, which is even more important. And so we are creators. And so we're not godlike, but in a way, it's like, this is really enjoyable, but the stakes are high. You fail once, that bubble is bursting and everything falls flat. And then their whole world comes back to you and say, wait a minute, I'm spending 500 euros and you failed, and that's it, an argument. So it's more than anything, I think this is what I love in what I do. It's creating these moments. Yes. Choosing the guest. And right now, while I'm not working in a restaurant permanently, I do I try with a friend of mine who's a sommelier, his name is Olivier. We both love our craft. We both got a little bit tired of the insanity of restaurant world in New York, and after 24 years, I've done a lot here, and I don't want to step away from cooking or from being a restaurateur. I'm taking a little break to fix up things in my life, and really more than that, to rebuild in the sense of maybe recreating myself. What do I want to do now as a chef, as a restaurateur, as a human being? Right. Do I want to stay in New York? Do I want to explore new culture? Do I want to stay in both? And so all these questions are up in the air right now. I don't have all the answers, but I want to keep exercising my craft while working on the future and taking care of the past and all this. And so creating these dinners, typing menus, working the menus with the guests, choosing the wine with my friend, and then somehow, I don't want to say educating them during the dinner, but we go out, we make it a point to do a semi-entertaining, show to them, from talking about the food, he's talking about the wine, and engaging, interacting, and say, hey, we're not expecting you to just be like this, get the food, eat, and we interact with us, interact with you, and a lot of times we realize, because I used to do private dinners before just as a chef, and you have to be mostly in the kitchen, so less interaction with them, but the fact that we have this mechanism now It allows us to be really on point with their expectation, and keeping up with the trends.
Yes.
And so we're doing the same job as we would do as chef or GM or owners, restaurant owners. We stay aware. We stay à l'écoute. We keep learning and listening, and so that's something that we really need to continue.
Absolutely.
We all evolve
Yes.
in our own life, in our careers, in our situation, geographic or financial or emotional or anything. And so the only way to do a interesting, necessary, and beneficial evolution, progression, is to be aware, right? To listen to all that and not just be like, I'm just going to be like this. Some chefs are like that. What I've learned, I will do always, and I will die doing the same thing, and it's okay. If they respect and they do it well all the time, you know that when you go to this restaurant, you will have all these old classics, and a lot of people love that, especially in French cuisine.
And what do you think is the most surprising trend that you're seeing within French cuisine?
Within French cuisine?
Or in general, I mean, at these dinners?
What I like seeing now, that I didn't like before, especially, well, it's not only in New York, but even in France. Sometimes, I think when that need of changing happened, a lot of chefs understood it as we need to add more stuff. Like adding more salt when no additional salt was needed. So in terms of recipes or presentation, it means you have a trillion things in the plate that you really don't need.
Right.
It's a distraction for what's the main actor, right? If I'm having a banquet de veau, because I love that, and you're adding 5 different ingredients on it that really don't belong to the recipe, it's like, hey, look over here because this is not that great anymore. And it happened a lot here. I've seen this a lot. American cuisine, French cuisine, in France as well. And now I think there's a return to simplicity, to the core. You know, when like Alain Passard, I remember probably 10 years ago now, when he switched to becoming more of a vegetarian. That was before Daniel Hum.
Yes.
And like, I remember going there with the year my book was published and I was doing that tour in Paris. My father took there for lunch. And I remember eating the most simplest recipe in food that I've had, and I was in a 3-star Michelin. But at the same time, I was like understanding where Chef Passard was coming from. He has his garden on the rooftop. We ate a salad of hearts of tomato, what most people would throw away.
Yes,
So now the outside, the inside, salad of hearts of tomato. We had a Dover sole, cooked meunière, that's it. But the Dover sole was so fresh that it was still bent like this on the plate. And it was really about, let's not forget where we come from, that if we cannot manage to create great new recipes, then it has to be about the product. And not that we cannot create great recipes, but I mean, it brought a new movement of, let's stop with too many artifacts on the plate, on the table, on, so many great restaurants looking great, but then you eat and you're like, Right. But you're spending $500 or $300 or $200 because all of this is great. Yeah. So not because I'm a chef, but if I'm going to eat, not feed myself, but if I'm going to eat in a restaurant that somehow is supposed to be special, I expect to be, that the concept that's offered is honored.
Yes.
Right? If I'm going to spend $100 on the plate,
sure,
it has to be somehow special.
Absolutely.
Not the best in the world, but it has to be very excellent. And if you fail, you're like, okay, so I was distracted by all this. There are many restaurants like this in New York, Paris too. But in general, there's a return to simplicity and a refocus to, let's not take our guests for granted. If we cannot, and we should not have, so sometimes it's too bland, sometimes it's going to be all white and wood and all that, but you know what? You're able to focus on the company, on the food, on the wine, and at the end, that's what it is. And if you, on top of that, if you master this and you can add a beautiful layer of amazing decoration or the spot where you are now, then it's a win-win-win. But yeah.
Wow, you have presented so much today. And I have to say, Chef Florian, you are a word chef as well. I hear the poetic and the author, and
that's from talking a lot to my guests.
Passed down to your generation. It's amazing. I just have learned so much. Thank you for sharing about
thank you for
the
having
past,
me.
the present, and the future. Dear foodie friends, I'll make sure we have links to his book. I'll also make sure we have links to your website. So if you're looking to hire for a very special event, please reach out to Chef Florian Hugo. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me, Margaret. It was a very pleasure to have you.
So wonderful.
To have me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear foodie friends, for joining me on this culinary journey through Kitchen Chat. Always remember to take a moment and savor the day.
And keep on cooking. No matter how much you're going to fail that recipe, keep trying, and you eventually build your own and make it very successful.
Perfect.
Let's not lose the craft.
Don't lose the craft.
At home or in restaurants.
Very important.
Yes.
Very important.
Everything
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Oh, this was great.